The best local agent harness in 2026 is not the one with the most GitHub stars. It is the one that developers running agents all day keep coming back to. And that answer has changed. A year ago, the question barely existed. Today, it is the only question that matters because the models have largely converged and the wrapper around the model now decides your entire experience. One word will keep coming back in this video. Reliable. Hold on to it. Past the feature screenshots, past the star counts, reliability is what actually separates these harnesses on real work. Keep 4 things in your head as we go. The harness itself, the model you point at it, where that model lives, and what you are actually asking the agent to do. Every pick in this video is really about matching those 4. Get one wrong and the other 3 don't matter. Start with the headline. The model race is over. It ended in a tie. Claude Opus 4.8 hits 88.6% on SWE Bench, verified the highest published number in this category right now. GPT 5.5 in the Codex harness leads Terminal Bench 2.1 at 83.4%. Gemini 3.5 Flash is right there at 76.2. The differences are real, but they are shrinking every month. What is not converging is the harness. The same model in 2 different harnesses gives you 2 very different outcomes. A researcher put this question directly into a public post this year. Why does Claude Code feel so much more effective than running the same Claude model inside a different tool? The answer is the harness. That is the whole point of this video. So which harness do you actually start with? If you have never run a local agent before, or you have tried one and given up because the setup was a nightmare, the answer is the same. There is one name the community keeps pointing newcomers toward, and it is not even close. OpenCode is the default open source pick of 2026. No qualifier. If you want a single safe starting point, this is it. It has crossed 172,000 GitHub stars, the most starred open source coding agent on GitHub with 1.68 million weekly NPM installs as of June 2026. It is MIT licensed, model agnostic across 75 plus providers, and it runs local models through Ollama and any open AI compatible endpoint. No code leaves your machine unless you tell it to. The harness is genuinely deep. You get custom primary agents and sub-agents defined in JSON or Markdown, each with its own model and its own permissions. It supports MCP, agents, MD context files, and LSP integration across 20 plus languages, which means the harness loads language-aware context automatically rather than making you manage it. The architecture is client-server, run OpenCode serve, and you get a headless OpenAPI server for async and remote use. Install the whole thing with one curl command. The community sentiment around it is unusually clean. People post, unprompted, that its terminal interface is better than the bigger, better funded names. One caveat worth knowing up front. Anthropic prohibits Claude Pro and Max subscriptions in OpenCode, so if you want Claude underneath, you need an API key, not a subscription. That is not a deal breaker. It just means you pay per token rather than per month. OpenCode is the pick when you want maximum provider flexibility, a deep harness, and the ability to run entirely on local hardware. But flexibility is not always what you need. Sometimes you need control. Surgical, precise, reviewable control over every single line the agent touches. And for that, the community has a completely different answer, one that has been quietly winning for 3 years and nobody talks about enough. Aider is the original. It has been doing this since 2023, and it is still the best at one specific thing: disciplined Git-native editing. That is not a consolation prize. For a huge portion of real coding work, it is exactly what you want. What makes Aider different is how it treats Git. Every AI edit becomes one atomic commit with a written by the model commit message. Your Git log reads like a change log. If the agent wanders off or makes a bad call, you revert one commit and you are back. No hunting through a tangled history. No bundled whip a bunch of stuff. The repo map it builds from your Git repository gives it a structural understanding of your codebase, not just the files you hand it. It is also the most model-flexible terminal harness available today. The Aider leaderboard tracks 70-plus models. You can run GPT-5 for the hardest refactors, switch mid-session to a cheaper model with a single slash command, or point everything at a local DeepSeek or qwen model via Ollama for fully offline work. Mid-session model swaps are one command away. No other harness makes that as seamless. The honest catch: Aider does not natively support MCP as of mid-2026. There is an open RFC and third-party workarounds exist, but if MCP is a hard requirement for your workflow, this is a real gap. It also does not pretend to be an autonomous overnight runner. Aider is a pair programmer. You are sitting there, reviewing each change as it lands. For surgical, commit by commit editing with full model freedom and Git as your safety net, nothing beats it. Now, both of those harnesses, OpenCode and Aider, are tools you run. You configure them, you point them at a model, you stay in control. But some people do not want a tool they run. They want a foundation they build on. They want to look inside the loop, rewire it, strip out what they do not need, and add what no one else has thought of yet. For those people, there is a third name, and it comes from someone you probably already trust. Pi is the breakout newcomer and the most intellectually interesting harness in this list. It comes from Armin Ronacher, the person who created Flask and Jinja, and it shows. Pi is built around one idea. A harness should be small enough to understand and hackable enough to make your own. Its core runs on a sub 1,000 token system prompt using what it calls lazy skills, modular instruction blocks that only load into context when the task actually needs them. A standard coding task does not load the deployment skill. A browser task does not load the Git skill. The result is a harness that stays lean and sharp even on large contexts. Because it never bloats itself with instructions, it is not using that session. This architecture is the reason Pi keeps coming up as a foundation for custom agents. People are not just running Pi, they are building on it. OpenClaw, one of the most discussed personal agent projects of 2026, was directly inspired by Pi's design philosophy, a powerful agent living on a minimal surface. If your goal is to understand and control what your agent is actually doing at every step, Pi is built for that from the ground up. The trade-off is that Pi is less polished out of the box than OpenCode. You get more control and less hand-holding. For someone who wants to wire their own tools and own their own loop, that is a feature. For someone who wants a running agent in 20 minutes, start with OpenCode. But here's where it gets interesting. A harness is only half the setup. Every one of these tools is only as good as the model you put underneath it, and getting that pairing wrong is the most common mistake people make. For most local setups, the model community keeps circling back to qwen 327b dense, reliable, fits on a single 24 gigabyte card, and runs on a used 3090 most people can actually afford. 4-bit quantized builds from Unsloth are on Hugging Face and ready to drop in. For bigger jobs that need more memory, qwen 3.5a3b is the mixture of experts alternative, where idle experts sit in system RAM and only the active slice needs to live on the GPU. Speed will come up. Local is not instant. On a 3090, you are looking at 37 tokens a second. The pros stop fighting that and run parallel agents instead through vllm as the serving layer so the card is busy the whole time rather than idling between tokens. Vllm is not a harness for one deep refactor. It is what you reach for when the answer to slowness is more agents, not a faster one. The privacy case for local is now the obvious one. For client work under an NDA, your prompts and your code never leave the machine. No repo uploaded. No tool call sitting in a log on someone else's server. No policy email next month. A used GPU paid once against a monthly subscription that compounds forever. Within a couple of years, the local box is simply cheaper, and it never changes its terms. One name worth a separate mention. Claude Code from Anthropic is the deepest proprietary harness in the field by most measures. It has 30 lifecycle hook events, dynamic workflows for orchestrating parallel subagents, and leads SWE bench verified at 88.6% with Opus 4.8 underneath. The community call on it is unusually one-sided. The best coding agent in the market, and it's not close, is how the top upvoted thread describes it. It is not free, and it is the heaviest token spender in the category, roughly 3 to 4 times heavier than Codex on the same task. For programmable terminal depth, nothing else matches it right now. But it is not local, and it is not open, which is the whole reason this video exists. So line the whole field up and it gets clean. Want the open source default with maximum provider support and a deep harness? OpenCode. Want disciplined, commit by commit editing with total model freedom and Git as your safety net? Aider. Want a hackable base to build your own agent on top of? Pi. Want autonomous, unattended runs in CI or self-hosted infrastructure? OpenHands. Want the agent loop inside your editor? Cline. Want a general agent that goes beyond code? Goose. Most heavy users end up running two. They route surgical edits to Aider, autonomous longer tasks to OpenHands or OpenCode, and swap models freely underneath based on what the task needs. The honest caveat. This list has a shelf life measured in weeks. Root code was archived in May 2026. Gemini CLI stopped serving individual users in June. The projects that looked stable 6 months ago are not all still here. Before you standardize a team on any of these, check 2 things: the actual license and the date of the last commit. Stars show popularity. Recent commits show whether the project will still be running in 6 months, but the direction is clear. The model race ended in a near tie at the top. What is still moving is the harness. Pick the wrapper that fits how you actually work, point it at the model your hardware can run, and the local stack stops being a compromise and starts being the obvious choice. If this saved you a weekend of testing, subscribe, and I will see you in next one.